All right, so I'm going to keep an eye on the chat feature because I cannot hear anybody. Want to welcome you all. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to attend this session. This is part 2 of an audiology-related geriatric education series. The first portion we focused on hearing loss, its effects on patients, especially the geriatric population, and things that we can do as professionals in the medical field to help them. Today we're going to be talking about mainly hearing aids. There are a whole bunch of different types, styles, and technology levels of hearing aids we're going to be discussing. I also want you to all become familiar with how devices are recommended and which patients are a good candidate. And we're also going to be discussing some local resources for your patients as well. All right, hearing aids. So this is meant to encourage participation, and since I can't hear you, this might make it a little bit more difficult. If you all could just think about what your definition or understanding of a hearing aid is, and if you have the ability to type something in so I could read that, that would be great. Now I'm not seeing the chat feature. All right, so if we're not able to get participation that way, oh, there we go. Yes, so a device which assists in hearing loss. And assist is a great word. I always tell my patients they're called hearing aids for a reason. They're there to aid in helping the patient hear better, not to cure or completely fix their hearing loss. Correct, different models, and we're going to discuss those. So there's some that go internally in the ear canal. There are external devices, and there are also surgically implanted devices we're going to discuss as well. Thank you. All right, so what is a hearing aid? It is a very sophisticated computer, basically. So it's an electronic device worn at the ear level. It used to be analog technology, and with the digital age, we've been able to really make these devices act and behave in a manner that really enhances the patient's ability to hear in most listening situations. The most current complaint that I receive is hearing and listening in noise, and so that's something that the hearing aid companies try to tackle as much as possible. They're designed to amplify environmental sounds and speech sounds. Now, something I'm sure we've all heard at one point or another is that a patient has either had a personal experience or known someone that has worn a hearing aid, and they say it just turns everything up. We're going to talk about that a little bit because it really depends on the technology and where they get it. Another thing I like to tell my patients about hearing aids is the technology is typically replaced every 4 to 6 years or so. This isn't due to the fact that they discontinue working, but rather that if you think about cell phone technology, computer technology, in 4 to 6 years, the current cell phone that you're using in most cases will be obsolete, and it's very similar with hearing aid technology. If you have questions at any point, please feel free to chat them. Basic components of a hearing aid, just wanted to let you know what goes into it. Looking at this list, a lot of people think, well, my goodness, why are they so expensive? A lot of the cost, believe it or not, goes into research, trying to miniaturize the devices, again, improve that computer processor on the inside and make them do much more than their previous generation devices have done. So the basic idea behind a hearing aid is there's microphones. Those pick up the sounds, turn them into an electrical signal. They go through the microchip, which determines what it's hearing and how loud that needs to be for the patient. It goes through the amplifier, and then it goes through a receiver which converts the signal back to actual sound waves. All hearing aids have batteries to power them. We're going to talk about the batteries a little bit more in detail. There are primary hearing aid manufacturers available. A lot of audiologists call them the top 6. Some audiologists believe there's only top 5. Our university currently works with Phonak, which you'll see in the top left, and Starkey, which is in the middle. We're currently working on adding Oticon and Resound as well. Not all audiologists work with all of the manufacturers. Most people have preferred manufacturers that they like the company, the product, and the overall customer satisfaction with them as well. I mentioned this in the first part of the talk, but I think it's very, very important. Hearing aids today are not your grandpa or your grandma's hearing aids. There used to be patients where they would have a certain amount of hearing loss and hearing aids just would not help them. And in most cases, that's not true. So it's really important to know, even if the patient tells you that they've tried hearing aids and that they weren't successful, it's good to ask them how long ago that was and when the last time they saw a hearing professional, because again, technology has changed so much that most patients would be surprised to see that they can benefit from current technology. Okay. In most cases, you do need a diagnostic hearing evaluation to determine the type of technology that's recommended. We have hearing aid dispensers as well as audiologists in the area, and both are certified to provide a hearing evaluation. Someone mentioned the different models or styles of hearing aids. I'm sure most of you at one point or another have seen one or more of these. The 4 devices on the left-hand side are custom made. As a professional, I take a mold or an impression of the ear, much like I'm sure some of you have had at the dentist at one point or another. And then the company manufactures the device to fit completely in the canal. And then these other ones on the right-hand side are the behind the ear styles. Rule of thumb behind the sizes is that the more hearing loss the patient has, the bigger the device needs to be. So you'll notice that that invisible in the canal device is very, very small, goes completely in the canal. And then you go up to the in the ear, or the ITE, which pretty much fills up the entire concha bowl of the ear. And again, that just is determined by the hearing loss. I tell my patients, the more hearing loss you have, the more powerful that computer needs to be, and therefore the computer does need to be a little bit bigger. Some products also pair or couple with an ear mold. This is, again, a custom product. And in a lot of cases, these devices do a couple things. They help the hearing aid stay on the ear, and they also help direct the sound where it needs to go, which is into our auditory system. These are not required for every hearing aid style, and mostly these couple with the behind the ear style. Batteries. So hearing aid batteries come in different sizes. Again, usually the bigger the hearing aid, the bigger the battery needs to be. These are zinc air batteries. Most patients are surprised to learn they only last about 7 days. The good news is that they're relatively inexpensive. They tend to run about $1 a piece. And if you think about them lasting a week, most patients spend about $8 a month on batteries. One of the newest developments that a lot of professionals are not aware of is that hearing aid companies now have lithium-ion batteries, which are rechargeable. I find this really great for the geriatric population, especially those with significant arthritis or dexterity problems. if they have to work with these batteries, and the pictures that you see are pretty close to the size. They're very, very small. Taking this little battery out, throwing it away, and putting a new one in can cause significant problems. So again, with the development of technology, we now have lithium-ion rechargeable options in which the patient takes the hearing aids off and literally just puts them in a little charging dock, which is really nice. For those of you who are aware of the effect of trash and things like this that do not compose on our ecosystem, the rechargeable batteries also have that draw as well. The lithium ion do charge the cost a little bit more, but in the long run, it's still cheaper than buying batteries, $8 a month for that 4 to 6 years that the batteries last. Counseling process. So when I see a patient, I do a full diagnostic evaluation. We talked about this in the first talk, but just to review, I do otoscopy. We want to make sure that that is clear, everything looks normal. I do a test called tympanometry. If you're not familiar with that, it checks the mobility of the tympanic membrane and how well the middle ear function is working. And then we do a full diagnostic hearing evaluation. It's my job as a professional to make sure that these patients understand these test results. And it's important that I do so in a relatable manner. They come in and say, I can't hear a noise, or my grandchild sounds like she mumbles. And in this case, that's how they relate their hearing loss to the real world. If you've had your hearing tested before, you're aware of the fact that it's a whole bunch of different beeps. And then we do some speech testing, but it's in quiet, which really isn't an everyday, realistic listening environment. So when I do the counseling, I make sure to let the patient know that their hearing loss is affecting their ability to hear certain speech sounds. An example would be high frequency hearing loss really affects the consonant sounds such as S, F, TH. And it's the consonants that give our speech that clarity or definition of what's being said. And so I relate that back to that muffled or mumbled sound quality. My favorite example is without consonants, a lot of us would sound like Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 wah. And that really kind of helps connect it for them. When I recommend hearing aids, it's important to me that they understand and relate what test results I just showed them back to their quality of life, and let them know that these devices can really help make a difference in their quality of life. I do some counseling on the styles and technology levels, and I'm going to give you an example of that because there are different technologies available, and what I tell my patients is not everybody needs the Bentley of hearing aids. So I use some analogies like that to kind of help them understand what we're discussing. I also like to counsel on realistic expectations. Again, it's really important for patients to know that these are not going to restore the hearing they had when they were in their 20s. It's going to help them live a better quality of life, but not necessarily give them that perfect hearing quality back. When I counsel, I consider a few different things. Age of a patient always comes into play. With geriatric patients, I run into some roadblocks when counseling regarding hearing devices, such as, I don't think I'm going to live long enough to really need to spend the money on these because I don't think I'll benefit from them. Degree of hearing loss, this comes into play because I need to know which hearing aid of those ones that I pictured are best for the patient. Degree of communication difficulty. This is always really interesting. When I have patients come in, I try to have them bring a family member or a friend that they communicate with on a frequent basis. We call them the frequent communication partner. Reason is that in a lot of cases, the patient's perceived difficulty is going to be very different from their actual difficulty that they are experiencing. The reason behind this is that hearing loss occurs typically so slowly that the patients just really don't know what they're missing until it's gone. Motivation to use hearing aids is also important. If patients have no motivation, I could sell them the best top-of-the-line technology, and in most cases, they're going to end up in the drawer, which is what I, as a professional, try to avoid. So I really do not like to push devices on patients. They really need to have some kind of motivation to use them. Budget is a big one. As we discussed briefly last time, technology tends to run $3,000 to $6,000 for a pair. If you can imagine most of your geriatric patients who are on a fixed income, that is a significant amount of money. Also, again, take into consideration dexterity and vision. Even if a candidate is a good option for that smaller device, if they can't manipulate it and can't put it in their ear, it's not going to work. Vision is also important because you need to tell the right hearing aid from the left hearing aid. They are programmed differently. And so both dexterity and vision need to come into play. So this is how I counsel my patients for technology. You basically have 4 different technology levels: the basic, select, advanced, and premium. On the left-hand side are different listening environments. So what I do with my patient is I tell them, in order to make the best recommendation for you, I need to go through some of these listening environments. And that's because the more noise you're in, the more technology you need to help you manage that noise. So you can see at the bottom, we start off with fairly quiet situations, a home environment, one-on-one conversations. As you get higher on that listening environment graph, you're getting into some noisier situations, meetings or small groups, working in a loud working environment, all the way up to crowds or large sporting events. You can see that the technology correlates with that, in that the basic is really for someone who has a very quiet lifestyle. And then the more noise they're in, the better that computer needs to be to help them manage all of that noise. This is vital when I make a recommendation, because if a patient is very active, say a baby boomer, still working, does a lot of very active things outdoors, is in the car with their kids a lot, goes to UNR games, they're going to need that premium technology. If they select the advanced technology, it's still going to help them, but they might not be as satisfied with that product as they would advance. The other thing that comes into play here is cost, because of course the higher you go up in technology, the more expensive it is. And sometimes it comes down to a compromise between which technology is most appropriate versus which one the patient can afford. In this case, you need to consider that, because something at this point for that patient would be a lot better than nothing. This is the average cost of hearing aids. Again, I try to tell my patients this cost goes on for about 6 years or so. And so that, upfront is a big cost, but it is not something that they pay every year. So I have a question. It says, do the manufacturers offer payment plans for devices, or is it the full amount due up front? The answer is, if a payment plan is offered, it's offered by the professional that's fitting the device. So as an audiologist, we purchase these devices from the manufacturers, and then we sell them to the patient. And so at UNR, we do have payment plans. We are a nonprofit, so there's no interest or anything charged on the payment plans. Other offices use a system such as Care Credit. I don't know if any of your clinics accept Care Credit. We could not contract with them because we're nonprofit, and the university did not like their contract that they offered. Some patients also like to put them on any kind of rewards credit card. If you're going to pay $6,000 for something, you could at least get those miles. So there's different ways that can occur. There are also some patients who I've sent to Nevada Medicaid, who really couldn't afford even that entry level, even with payments. Nevada Medicaid will pay for an entry level product every 2 years if the patient qualifies. Any other questions? All right. Programming of hearing aids. So again, the devices are not just set and then you're good to go. They're not like glasses. So what we do is we take the patient's hearing results, we put those into the computer, and then the computer tells the hearing aid exactly how much hearing loss there is, and then how much help the patient's going to need as a result of that. We also have verification technology. So I can put the device in a patient's ear, put a small probe microphone into the patient's ear canal while the hearing aid is in there and actually measure how loud it is and verify that the settings are what's best for the patient. We also seek regular patient feedback regarding sound quality. There are different things patients report that allow me as a professional to know what changes need to be made. For example, if someone comes in and says their voice is echoing, that usually is the result of too many low frequencies, so I can adjust based on that. When they're first fit, we teach proper care and use. It can be a lot of information though, so in my experience with any population, not just the geriatric population, but that information needs to be provided in writing, and we tend to review it more than once for specific things that we go over. Again, realistic expectations are counseled at the time of the fitting of the hearing aids as well. This is my follow-up schedule. So again, I do not just fit these expensive devices on a patient and send them out the door. I have one appointment within 2 weeks after their first fit, a second appointment within 4 weeks. You'll notice that's within that 4-week time period, and that's because the state of Nevada mandates a 30-day trial period with these devices. I find this really, really important because it's not about the sale for me. It's about how successful this patient is with these devices. So within that 4 weeks, if that device that we selected together is not working, we're able to exchange it for something else until we find something the patient is successful with. Once we're comfortable with what they have, there's a 3-month follow-up. And then every 6 months to clean and check the devices. Also, regardless of a patient deciding to move forward with hearing aids or not, once hearing loss is found, an annual audiogram or hearing evaluation should be recommended. It's a lot like vision loss. Once you have vision loss diagnosed, it's really important to monitor it to see if it's progressing, and if it is progressing, how quickly it is progressing. I get this question a lot. What about wholesale or bulk stores? What I like to tell my patients is it's important to look at not only the cost of the device, but the care and the services that you are receiving as well. I've also heard some professionals mention, why would you buy a medical device at a place you also buy your steak and toilet paper? And so there are a variety of different views out there on wholesale stores. What I like to think about is what is best for the patient. If a patient needs a device and it's more affordable at these stores and they get good service and they're happy, to me, then that's a perfect world. The wholesale stores also have better technology than they used to. And so that always helps. People ask me, well, if Costco has Phonak and you have Phonak, then why shouldn't I just get them at Costco? Another thing I use to educate my patients is that Phonak tells us the technology at Costco is a year older than what I'm allowed to fit or what I have access to in my practice. Who's heard of the new over-the-counter hearing aid bill? Anybody? I can see you, but I don't see any hands going up. All right, so over-the-counter hearing aid bill recently passed. It was proposed by Elizabeth Warren, and she proposed this bill in hopes of giving people better access to hearing aids. As professionals, honestly, we don't know that much about it yet. We have no idea who's going to be manufacturing the devices, but we do know the FDA is going to be closely following them. I did have one legislature that I spoke to compare them to cheaters, or the reading glasses that you can get in the store. And so there are some of us who are concerned, but it's something that we're going to kind of just have to watch and wait. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about other assistive technology. So what if your patient needs some help, but they really cannot afford hearing aids, and for some reason they can't qualify for Nevada Medicaid? So I want to show you this device over here in the middle right. This is what's called a pocket talker, and it basically is what it sounds like. So we've got a microphone that you can see sticking up, and then it also allows the patient to plug in a set of headphones, and it's pocket size, and then the patient would hand the microphone to whoever is talking, and then they would be able to amplify that sound and turn up the volume through the headphones that they're wearing. This is a very inexpensive device. In most cases, I want to say it's about $100 or less. Next, I want to talk about this phone that's in the green background in the top left-hand corner. This is called a caption call device. So most of my patients, even with hearing aids, struggle with hearing and understanding someone on the phone. This device has a live captioner, so the patient can listen to the call. The phone is amplified. They can turn up the volume, but the captioner will caption the speaker, and so the patient can listen and read along with what's being said. There is a small delay, not much, but I have patients who really, really enjoy this product because they feel like it opens up communication with their family a lot better. The nice thing about this technology is if a patient needs it, it's a federally funded program, and patients can qualify for one phone for free, and then they'll send somebody out to install it and teach the patient how to use it. So I'm a big advocate of these caption phones, especially if they're free to patients. Now, in order to qualify, the patient does have to get a signed form from an audiologist certifying that they have hearing loss and therefore need this phone. But again, it is free to those who apply and qualify. Top right-hand corner, I'm sure some of you have seen these. This is a fire alarm with a light flashing on it. So this, again, is a type of assistive technology for those who cannot hear. I have patients with pretty severe to profound hearing loss who are afraid to take their hearing aids off when they sleep. They think that if an alarm goes off, they're not going to be safe. And so this is something that has a very bright light that flashes, which will help wake them up. Bottom right-hand corner is an alarm clock. That little circular device you see there is a vibrator. And the patient will put that under their pillow. And so when the alarm clock goes off, it vibrates and wakes them up. Video relay service. If you ever have a patient that is capital D or culturally deaf and communicates primarily through sign language, and they want to make a phone call to schedule an appointment, a video relay service is one of the options that they can use. And it allows them to communicate with your office via sign language through a video interpreter. Most patients who are in need of this service are fairly familiar with it. But as a provider, I knew that when I first started and we don't really have a huge deaf population, I wasn't completely aware of it. Bottom left-hand corner, cute puppy. We've all heard of seeing eye dogs. There actually are hearing dogs. These dogs are trained to respond to a variety of household sounds like a microwave beeping, somebody knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell. And so this dog is designed to give its owner alerts when there's something that happens auditorily that the patient themselves might not be able to hear. Again, most cases, these programs tend to be free. The waiting list for these dogs is very long. There are multiple different places in the country that train these dogs. This one that I'm showing here I really like because they not only use dogs to help the hearing impaired, but they save them from shelters rather than get purebred puppies. Okay, this is also going to be a little tricky because it's a role play and typically requires me being able to hear you. And so maybe we can use the chat feature for this. What I would like to do is take a moment to do a little role playing where I'm a 72-year-old patient who you have been having an appointment with, and I've asked for clarification multiple times during the appointment. I would really like to know how you would go about recommending a hearing evaluation and discussing the possibility of hearing technology with me. Is there anybody on chat that would be willing to do that?
Okay. Hello?
Oh, that's so hard. I can see somebody else is talking and I can't.
Hi, Amani. She can't hear us. So if you could use the chat function down at the bottom, she would love to respond that way. I'm so sorry. She's having technical difficulties. Thank you so much.
I don't really think I have a hearing issue. Well, I seem to be hearing you just fine. Patty, can everybody see the chat box? Okay, perfect. Okay, well, what do you think there's something I should do about it? Oh, I don't know. I've never had anybody else tell me before that I seem to have difficulty hearing. Okay, well, you're my doctor and I've been going to you for quite some time now and I trust you. So let's go ahead and get that set up. Yes, I've heard that, but I really don't feel like I've been personally experiencing that just yet. Yes, I definitely want to be safe. So one of the things I want to take a moment to point out here is that sometimes asking some questions about specific things in the patient's life can have a big impact. There will always be that one patient that will deny difficulty with any listening situation. But in most cases, if I ask the patient a couple probing questions about common listening situations, I can get them to admit that there might be some difficulty. So for example, I might say something like, has anybody ever told you that the volume of the television when you listen to it is too high or too loud for them? How do you hear on the telephone? Do you have to turn the volume up? And sometimes they'll say, actually, I have to use speakerphone to hear or communicate with whoever's on the phone. So that's just a couple examples of maybe some more specific questions that you could ask a patient to try to help them understand and process where they might be having difficulty, even if they don't perceive it that way. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Thank you to the person on the chat for participating in that. Last thing I wanted to talk about, how am I doing on time, Patty? 5 minutes? Okay, so last thing I want to talk about is a cochlear implant. So I mentioned before that it's really important to try to get the patient in a hearing medical office to have that evaluation. Even if you don't think hearing aids will work for them, with today's technology, there is an option somewhere. So for those of you who aren't terribly familiar with a cochlear implant, I wanted to put this picture up. You'll notice this is a surgically implanted device. There is an internal portion and an external portion. There are some now where it's strictly internal, but the most commonly used and implanted device is the one that I'm showing here with the internal and external. What this system does is it bypasses our normal route of hearing through the auditory system, because those hair cells in the inner ear are so damaged that even if we make the sounds really loud with the hearing aid, the patient's not going to hear and understand what's going on. So the idea behind this device is we implant electrodes, in some cases up to 20 electrodes, and those stimulate the nerve endings in that cochlea directly. So rather than acoustical hearing, this is actually electrical hearing. It does take some time for the patient to adjust and get used to. Most patients that I activate with this device tell me I sound like R2-D2. I've also heard I sound like a chipmunk, Donald Duck, or Mickey Mouse. And so the sound quality initially is going to be very different. However, I've had many patients receive this device and their quality of life just does a complete 180. This is important for the geriatric population, as well as, say, children who have congenital hearing loss. The reason I say this is some patients take their age and automatically write themselves off for this process and this procedure. And there are some, serious considerations that need to be taken for the surgical aspects of this device. But as long as a patient is deemed, number one, a audiological candidate, meaning they have severe hearing loss and they don't benefit from hearing aids, then they go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor who evaluates the test results that the audiologist comes up with and then determines whether or not they are a good surgical candidate. The oldest patient I have ever had implanted with this device was 92. She lived about 2.5 years after she got this device, and I can tell you the transformation for her was night and day. She went from 0 understanding to about 86% speech understanding or intelligibility within 3 months after being implanted with the device. And seeing her personal transformation was also that she was this introverted, very quiet individual. And after the device, her family said her personality came back, and I really saw that. She was very animated. She loved to tell jokes. But it's really hard to do those things if you can't hear people's reactions or do the punchline. So again, just remember that if for some reason a patient is not a good hearing aid candidate, there are other devices out there that they could really benefit from. All right, here are the resources. I expanded on this a little bit from my last presentation. I added Deaf Centers of Nevada. And the reason I put them on there is that page I had with the fire alarm and the phones. They are also a good resource for patients who need technology like that but might not be able to afford it. It's called Deaf Centers of Nevada, but you do not have to be completely deaf to access their services. They also help individuals who are hard of hearing. Okay. Really quick, we offer full audiological services for diagnostics and management, including hearing aids and cochlear implants. If you have a patient in your population who is still working, which I always find unfortunate, but it happens, Vocal Rehab can help them get devices. I work directly with the Sertoma Club, who has a hearing aid bank that we can get patients devices through if they can't, again, qualify for Medicaid or pay for them. There's also manufacturer organizations like Starkey Here Now that can help get patients services. Cochlear implant wise, there are a couple companies online, and I like the communities that they have. So if you have a patient who's a candidate and they're not sure, you can direct them to these websites, and there are actually people who have gone through the very similar process, and they can interact with them and learn about their stories. All right, that is it. Do I have any questions? Yes, I will do that for you.
While she's typing that out, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. We have diabetes.
Are there any other questions?
At 8 a.m. tomorrow, and then we have antibiotic stewardship at 12:15. Alrighty, thanks for joining us, everyone. And we'll leave it up for a little bit so you can get our contact information. But thanks so much for coming to clinic today.